Welcome to another great edition of B2B Marketing Conversations. I've got a great conversation coming up today with Lorena Morales. For those who don't know who Lorena is, she's the VP of Marketing of Go Nimbly, and super excited because we have a number of things in common. As we started talking recently, we actually surprised ourselves in terms of who we focus on and kind of our composition. I just wanted to thank and acknowledge our sponsor, the Growth Ops Community, which is a professional network focused on aligning marketing, sales, and customer success to deliver excellent customer experiences in order to drive business growth. It's a community where growth ops professionals can consult and connect with one another, align on best practices, and foster personal growth. With that, I would love to bring Lorena onto the show here. And I will click her on.
Hi, everyone. It's like, John, you just opened the door to me. I love it. Yes, thank you for having me. Indeed, as you said, we surprised each other on the good side, because I know life has surprises that are not that good sometimes. But it was a fantastic surprise to hear someone this knowledgeable and that has spent so many years in the industry to think a lot like me, or like me thinking a lot like you. For those who don't know what is Go Nimbly, Go Nimbly is the first RevOps company in the US serving clients like Zendesk, Coursera, PagerDuty. And what we do is, of course, revenue operations, but what we do is sitting on the operations teams. And I've been with the company a little more than 2 years as their VP of marketing, indeed.
That is awesome, Lorena. And I think we're going to cover a bunch of different topics today. We're going to talk about kind of the making of a marketer. We started talking about introverted versus extroverted leadership. And then maybe pivot toward what you and I are seeing today. We both have agencies. We're both focused on ABM. We've seen kind of an evolution of the yesteryear marketer to today's marketer. And then maybe we wrap up with any other ABM observations. So with that, I would love to dig right in. And, I guess first thing, I would imagine, not having been in your exact shoes before, you are a head of marketing, so you're faced with kind of being on the hot seat, but you're selling to marketers. I too have been a head of marketing for 10 years. My hair was as dark as yours back when I was head of marketing. And I too sell into marketers. But I'm curious, what have you seen or felt as a marketing leader, particularly from your point of view and how you came into marketing?
Yeah, it's a funny story. I think that's how you and I started to talk. We do sell to marketing, but more like to operators right now. It's funny that you say your hair was as black as mine, because mine is starting to be as white as yours, because that's life, and that's the stress of the job, right? Like that comes with the job. So it's a funny story because my transition to marketing was very intentional. My background is in design. I live and breathe by design. But I realized that I had no idea how to sell any product or service that I created. So that's when I moved almost 9 years ago to the US to pursue my graduate education in marketing. And then a couple of years later, I went back to strategic design management, more on the design thinking side and how to grow teams and everything. And the reason why I did that transition to fully be like a head of marketing growing teams over the last 6 years is because I understood that I have this almost sixth sense to understand people. And even though my family or my friends couldn't describe me as someone social, I think I am very good at understanding both our audiences and my internal team, which is also my customer. So the entire conversation with you started on saying like, well, John, actually, I have a secret to tell you. I'm an introvert. And I was kind of ashamed of it. And then you said like, oh, wait a minute, me too. So we were kind of in a safe space talking about this, because if you think about it, marketing has been the social career by nature. And when we see, when I saw someone as you, again, this successful, struggling through the same things that I am currently struggling, I understood that there's this almost stereotype on the marketer. So I think that's why we decided to do this session. Like, we tend to talk about like what marketers do and best practices, but we don't often hear about how a marketer is really done. Like, what's the essence of the marketer, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And thinking about some of our similarities there, I've been a head of marketing in Silicon Valley, New York City, and Luxembourg. And that introversion, extroversion feature of me plays very differently in each of those markets. In Silicon Valley, it is a little bit more, in my experience, accepted. In New York, it was not accepted. And I think you two have been worked and lived in New York City and in the Valley and outside of the US. So we share that similarity. The one underlying theme, though, is the introversion, which I've never talked to anyone really about in depth. And I think it's confusing because this kind of role is a very forward-looking, projecting role. So people automatically assume that you're extroverted. And it can confuse, in my experience, a lot of people that you deal with because they're used to that in a head of marketing role. They're used to a lot of fireworks, a lot of explosive thoughts, whereas an introverted leader, whether they're marketing or becoming a marketing leader, they're probably a little bit more reserved. They're a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more analytical before reaching that conclusion. So to your point, I feel like the reason that you're able to read your teams and the customers so well is because you're going through that thoughtful process that perhaps others don't have as thorough of a process before they come up with ideas.
Absolutely. And I think talking to you and accepting that this introversion also somehow has a toll on some of the marketers. I think it's an important point to talk about because, as you said, you don't hear this that often. But the reality is that it also hits the expectation on your hiring manager and on the team that you are running. Because you just said it, like, for example, when I was doing this in New York, I was also part of one of the hardest industries, at least in my personal opinion, which is real estate. And in New York, also being a social city by nature, it's kind of never ending. You had like breakfast with clients, brunch with clients, happy hour with clients, dinner with clients. And that's where I started to begin to kind of analyze myself more as this introspective kind of personality that I have. Because the entire thing about introvert against extrovert or ambivert, the new, it's only about how you recharge yourself. It doesn't mean that we don't like to talk with people. The thing that we need to is to have meaningful conversations. And that's what I didn't understand until coming back to San Francisco when I changed industries again to healthcare, where there's no chit chat. Like with HIPAA and all of that, there's no, hi, I'm the funny Latina, and like, let's talk about tacos and burritos. No, it's like, that's a no. It's, you have to go straight to the point. You have to know the decision makers. And that's how you move through healthcare. So I understood that, that I didn't have to stay the happy hours. I didn't have to stay from 4 to 8. I didn't have to smile every single time. I mean, although yes, my smile is kind of characteristic. It's something that I can control, but I didn't have to say yes to every single thing to be effective. And that has been the biggest learn that I've got through probably my 9 years of career marketing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about the learnings of how you can survive as an introvert. I feel today with tools like this, for example, a recorded live session one-on-one, or with blogs, there are a number of ways that introverts can put themselves out there without the fear or the concern, and actually use it as a feedback mechanism. So that would be my kind of one piece of advice as an introvert, would be leverage the tools that are out there and share your thought leadership, because it's likely you've really thought through a number of these angles that your peers have not. And as an introvert, you can put that information out there and you don't know if it's going to resonate or not. It's a lot different than being in a group of people and then having to express a point of view on the spot. And that's where I feel like introverts may not shine in that particular scenario. An extrovert is going to stomp all over us introverts in those kind of scenarios. So you've got to find ways to compensate for that lack of perceived presence. What is there anything else that you would coach or advise an introverted leader that's going to become whether it's marketing leader or any leader? Anything else? Any other suggestions there?
I think it ties to your last point, John. And what my piece of advice would be is find your best way of communication. For me, it's writing, usually. I've been like that since I'm a kid. Like, I couldn't talk to my father because he's like this huge Mexican guy with a beard, a really black beard, and like a really hard expression. So, I mean, it's kind of funny because when I was very little, I've always been exactly the same shy that I am today. So I couldn't talk to him for some reason. And I started to write to him like, hey, daddy, this is happening to me, whatever. And until today, I find writing my best way of communicating with my team. And the other thing is make that communication avenue known to every single person that you work with, because it's not everyone's job to figure out how you like to be communicated. It's your job. It's your job to say like, hey, CEO, hey, COO, you know what? Like, I don't feel very comfortable in a meeting with 7 other people. Is there a chance that we can have either a one-on-one, or can I shoot you an email with important things? Yes or no? And find that early and find that fast.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And maybe even in the interview process, I learned this later in my interview process, is to really own that introversion piece. So right up front, say, this is the kind of person and the style that you just referred to. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking for somebody who's going to be shooting from the hip and fireworks, that's one of the other candidates. That's not me. Yep. So like I try to own it in a positive way. And I think people really respect that. And I like your idea of not just doing it in the interview, but carrying that through the organization. It is your responsibility. You've got to own it and kind of propagate it through. So I think that's excellent advice that you're giving there. Right. Maybe just pivoting for a moment, and I've been around a little bit longer than you have, but in terms of the changes that you've seen in your career, you've been in a couple different industries. We're now in a whole new world. What do you see that's really resonating that maybe didn't resonate before? Like, what's changed here, particularly post-pandemic?
Post-pandemic, I think I would like to talk about how, for example, ABM has become residential. But before that, I think I did my homework for this podcast. And I actually went a little further, not only before COVID, but like before my generation. So I went and asked my fantastic and fabulous team to find real people that worked in the 80s or 90s in what today is marketing. Back then it was more advertising. And what I found was really, really fun. And I think if I would have to choose where to live, I could still stay in the COVID area if you if you want to know, because back then I think communication between all brands, either B2C or B2B, was one-sided. Whatever the company wanted to create in terms of the narrative was possible, and what that meant was a lot of misinformation on a lot of campaigns, a lot of money spent in advertising without really knowing how that looked like. And I think at the end that was a lot of customers misinformed. Like, I can't help but think about like companies like Philip Morris and these companies that went ahead with their ads for decades. And today, I think the biggest change is precisely that. You can't fool your customer anymore. We have become more, not only hyper informed, but also hyper, how do I say it? Hyper needy, I guess. Think about it. Like, if your algorithm in Netflix doesn't show you exactly what you wanted to see, you get pissed. And it's so dumb, because it's like, well, it's a platform. But in today's days, like, why this thing doesn't know that I want to see this show instead of the other one? And then you kind of get furious about not getting the exact experience that you want. So I think that's number one. We moved from being business centric to customer centric, and what I like to call, this is just a personal name or a personal tag, relationship centered design. And what that means is every single effort that you do, either sales or marketing, or what we call at Gonimly the revenue team, should be not only focused on your customer, but on the relationship that you want to pursue with that person. So that's number one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're right. It's such a different world now. And I wasn't working in the 80s, but in the 90s, the difference that I see between then and now is exactly what you said about the transparency. Everything now is an open book. Yep. Your selling efforts have dramatically changed. Back in the day, it was stack a bunch of account executives in the field to go sell face-to-face, and marketing probably got away with being the pretty PowerPoint or the events or the tchotchkes, very tactical in nature. Now, more than any time before, I think business is completely digital now. And the reliance on marketing is 100 times stronger today than perhaps it was in the 90s. And with that comes that transparency. Like you said, there's a bunch of providers out there that do analysis, G2, Trust Radius. There's a handful of them out there that analyze SaaS companies and software. And all of your reviews are out for the public to kind of take a look at. In addition to that, you have Slack channels, which people can compare notes quickly, and they're making decisions based on that information and then coming into the sales cycle. So radical transparency didn't exist before, and it totally does now.
Yeah. And adding to that, I think with that digitalization that happened, also we all transitioned to a new way of measuring things. So I think that's another huge change in like the past decades and today, where in the past, this is something new I learned. So like I'm educating myself on like what was going before I even was born. But TV ads were measured by this thing called Nielsen ratings. Just to see if people were watching it, but because it was kind of the only thing that they had. Today, with those tools that you mentioned, which, by the way, we at Gonimly are super good at spending money in tools, those success metrics are or should be directly tied to revenue. You didn't see that in the past. You still don't see that with a lot of companies. Marketing owning a seat at the revenue table, it's only because those tools and that technology now allows us to prove and to kind of finger point exactly where our efforts were and what is the return on investment on the majority of them, except branding, which is which is an entire different beast. But other than branding, which is a little harder to measure, I think that's why we deserve that. That's it. So yeah.
How about pivoting for our last question? If you were to think about kind of the trends of what we just talked about, the 80s and 90s marketing and today's marketing, and an area that you and I are both focused on, account-based marketing.
Yeah.
What changes have you recently seen that, like if you were to give a piece of advice or two for the audience to take an action on, what within account-based marketing would you suggest to take a look at right now?
That's a good one. Well, ABM is, as you said, now my current obsession. What I've seen change the most, it's one, direct mail campaigns. And that's why we on our team say that ABM has gone residential, because platforms like Alice and Sendoso and other great providers and partners, they have figured out how to follow your target accounts or your target contacts to their homes. So that at the very beginning, honestly, I was a little scared because it felt a little bit intimidating. But reality is that now with the Zooms and all of this, we're starting to see the most human parts of all of us. So like when I started to see that everyone was the NBC guy and everyone had like the dog and the kid and the whatever on the back, I started to think about it and say, like, you know what? Probably it is acceptable. We still need to keep going with business. We still need to keep getting in touch with our clients, especially this moment, because they need to know that we are supporting them. So that's one of the changes. And the other one is conversational marketing being leveraged more than anything. That was before COVID when it kind of started, but I see it increasingly being effective for revenue teams. And simply because what conversational marketing has allowed us is to know exactly the time where our customers are ready to buy or are not ready to buy. And the other very important thing is it allows both marketing and sales to start the opportunity from very early stages together. It's not sales and marketing anymore. It's both people are on tools like Drift or Intercom or whatever you are using. And everyone has their eyes in the same boat. So I think that's not going anywhere. It's a great way to know your customers in real time, which for me, it's just ballistic. You know exactly what they are asking and when they are asking for it. And it's on you to kind of react to those engagements.
Yeah, Drift certainly is a very powerful tool in a chat overall. I think I wouldn't disagree with anything that you say. I would add one other thing, and it's a little tactical. We started talking about it before we got onto the show here, and it's data. With 15 million people unemployed right now, unfortunately, there is a large probability that your database is not as whole as it once was. It was on average decaying at 3% per month, according to Salesforce. Now with 15 million people out of work, it's likely that it's decayed even quicker. Oh, wow. And so with an account-based strategy, if there was one area I would take a look at, it probably would be the data side, in addition to the areas that you talk about as well. I think what you bring up is really great points about personalization in particular. Yeah. Because that's the value of account-based marketing. It's being very personalized and having the ability to know where accounts are at any one point in time during their journey.
Right. And it's not a coincidence that now companies are starting to call it account-based everything, which some of them, it's more like a marketing inside thing to get like everyone excited, because I've seen very, very few companies when they reach that alignment, even with finance, Because if you talk about account-based everything, you're talking also about product, you are talking about engineering, you're talking about finance, you're talking about customer success and customer support. And there's very, very few companies that I've seen done that alignment successfully to even call it account-based everything. On the other hand, we have people now calling it account-based sales. So it's just funny that the kind of segmentation or siloing it's still happening, but now they are adding the AB letters before it. But I mean, at the end, I think it's here to stay. It's a GTM strategy, in fact, for us, and it's one that has proven success. So I don't see it going anywhere either.
I think you're absolutely right. You bring up an excellent point about language and how language really matters, whether it's account-based marketing, account-based sales, account-based everything. Different people have different impressions about what that solves for. So having clarity around what is account-based marketing or what is account-based sales can go a real long way. I would agree with you without a doubt. Account-based marketing is here to stay. Even though there's consolidation in the industry right now with players, we're starting to see a trend of companies saying we've got to focus more, and the way we're going to get that focus is through account-based marketing on fewer accounts that we really know will be meaningful to produce revenue at day's end.
Exactly.
Excellent, Lorena. Well, we covered a lot of territory today. I'm super excited that you invested time with us and look forward to keeping in touch.
Not a problem. It's been absolutely my honor to talk about these things that are my day-to-day and that are the things that keep me in marketing. Like if tomorrow I end up in sales, I'm going to reach out to you like, hey, John, you know what? Like now I made it even worse. My introversion ended up in sales. But I hope that doesn't happen. For today, I'm very thankful for your time. So thank you for that. And thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And an introverted sales leader is a great leader because you're always listening. So it's a real strength.
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me. I'm okay. I'm okay.
Excellent, Lorena. Thank you.